And welcome to the Huddle, KGUN9's weekly streaming sports talk show. I'm Jason Barr, joined by Pat Parris. Sweet 16 action time. Pat, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, Sweet 16 still dancing. There's a lot of other teams that can't say that, Jason, so I'm good.
Arizona can after wins over Akron and Oregon. And we're going to start off with our weekly Huddle poll question as the Wildcats will play top-seeded Duke in the East Regional semifinal in Newark on Thursday. What is the key to defeating the Blue Devils in the Sweet 16? A, contain Cooper Flag. B, a big game from Caleb Love. Or C, is it the all-around three-point shooting? We mean offense and defense there. Actually talked to somebody today who said it was points in the paint. So it could be any number of things, but you got to pick one there, A, B, C, or A, B, or C. You can vote on KGUN's X account or on our website, kgun9.com. Pat, do you have a strong feeling one way or the other?
Once again, you've asked a question in such a manner with three different answers that you could take a little of each, right? I mean, you could make an argument for all three, and I think you could make a pretty convincing argument. I think it's a little too easy to say contain Cooper Flag. You can't contain Cooper Flag. You hope to just slow him down a little bit. For me, it was B. It was Caleb Love.
Me too. That's what I wrote.
And I really think it's a different Caleb Love this year than we saw at the end of last year, where he began his struggles even before they got to the Pac-12 tournament. And despite a okay run in the Pac-12 tournament, he didn't play well. They get to the big dance and he didn't play well. I think it's a completely different Caleb Love. If he continues to play at the level he's played the last few weeks, I think Arizona's they've got a chance. I think it's a really good chance as well.
All right, we'll get to Arizona and the wins over Akron and Oregon on its way to the Sweet 16. But I want to start with the NCAA tournament a little bit, Pat. And, all Sweet 16 teams are from major conferences. Yep. And it looks to me like NIL is really kind of squashed here, the Cinderella team. I mean, we almost had it a little bit there with Colorado State out of the Mountain West. I don't consider Arkansas any type of Cinderella. That's a SEC team with McDonald's All-Americans. I don't care if they're a 10 seed.
Yeah.
But here's the situation, Pat. You had, I'm going to talk about the Lehigh Duke upset from a decade ago. You could point to a number of situations. But C.J. McCollum, a future NBA player, was on that Lehigh team, if I'm not mistaken. In today's college basketball, he wouldn't spend 3 or 4 years at Lehigh. He would just spend 1 or 2. He'd have a big money offer to a big-time team and not have to sit out a year. So you're not going to have a mid-major team that's played together 3 or 4 years with some good players against maybe a bunch of one-and-done kids at a top school where you kind of have an upset. And I think it kind of takes away from the amount of upsets we're seeing. I don't think it's a fluky situation. I think there's something real to that.
No, I think we're seeing the results of NIL, and I think it's always be careful what you wish for. You want to see the athletes fairly compensated in all sports, but we focus on right now on basketball, and you see that compensation, but there's nothing fair about the way the compensation gets distributed. That may or may not change significantly under this new House ruling that will be solidified in early April and then implemented in July, meaning that there will be a salary cap of some kind, a cap of how much money each university can pay out. But guess what, Jason? That's based on each school according to their conference. So in other words, the Big 12 will get this level of amount they can pay out to the student athletes. The SEC will get this level, and the Big 10 will get this level. So it's just going to redistribute the wealth in a lot of ways towards the upper echelon universities in these major Power 4 conferences anyway. So it's really not going to change. You're right. We see the teams like, my alma mater, Drake University, they get a big win in the first round, and then they run into a Power 4 conference team and lose in the second round. Even though they did beat Missouri, a Power 4 conference in the team in the first round. You get those first round upsets. You don't get them in the second round. You watch the games and you listen to the commentators, and they'll say this player X came from St. Mary's, and this player X came from McNeese State, and now he's playing here, or go on and on and on. And it's all because of NIL. And it's I don't know what the answer is. There's got to be an answer, but this is not sustainable. I think it's going to hurt the sport in the long run. And we love college basketball in March, but I think it's going to hurt it in the long run.
The three Florida Atlantic Stars from a couple of years ago, the
Yeah.
Florida Atlantic players are now on different teams in the Sweet 16. A crazy graphic was on X about the starting lineups of all the teams and all the different schools they've come from. I believe that Purdue is the only team in the Sweet 16 with all 5 starters starting their career at that same school, Purdue. In Arizona's case, when Trey Townsend starts, so here are the 16 schools, and if you're looking at this and it looks like a little bit of a maze, what you want to read from is top to bottom. So top to bottom is the starting 5. So I'll tell you where Arizona is. Okay, on the
It's all over the map.
bottom, the second one from the left on the bottom. So you've got Caleb Love, North Carolina. You've got Jaden Bradley, Alabama. That's a camel there for Anthony Del Orso starting his career at Campbell. I believe that's Howard for Trey Townsend. I'm sorry, Oakland for
Trey Townsend.
That's what I meant. Oakland for Trey Townsend, and then Tennessee for Toby Awaka. So there you have Arizona. They got nobody, right? I can't even tell if there's another school with nobody because there's so many schools on this list. But you see there, if you move your eyes a little bit to the right, you see the 5 Ps. That's Purdue. That looks to me like the only one. You got a couple there with 4, like Michigan State and Duke. But other than Purdue, that's all you got.
Well, and some of these schools, like a Duke, you've got a lot of freshmen. You got a couple of freshmen in there too, and that means they're obviously going to start their careers at that school. Is Trey Townsend from Oakland, is that going to be the last Cinderella that we see make it to the Final Four for a while? It might be. I mean, think of that. Maybe that was the last one.
Well, wait a second. Oakland didn't make it to the. You mean the Sweet 16?
They didn't make it to the Elite 8. I think they made it to the Elite 8. Yeah, I think they made it to the. I'll have to look that up. You're right. But they made it a deep run when nobody expected them to, and he was a big part of it. So my point is that going to be the last time that we see those Cinderella story in the NCAA tournament? He might be a
Oakland only won 1 game last year.
I thought they won a couple of games.
State. So 11th seeded North Carolina State beat 14th seeded Oakland 79-73. But I know what you mean, though.
Yeah.
I mean, we got Florida Gulf Coast when they went to the Sweet 16. Obviously, Florida Atlantic in the Final Four. There's been some double-digit mid-majors, and that's what is going to be tougher to see down the road. So I do think that's a little bit of a disappointing aspect of it. In Arizona's case, well, they got by Akron pretty quickly. So, good for Arizona. And that was a game that really could have gone either way. But I do think the Wildcats had more talent than Oregon. You could see that. They kind of beat themselves a little bit with a 3-on-1 missed dunk and some foul shots that they missed.
Well,
but I think they had more talent than Oregon in that second round.
And they just came out of the block so slow. And just, it just took them a while to get going. And yeah, they didn't panic, and Tommy Lloyd didn't panic. And that was great to see that they came back. But in a lot of ways, they made it more difficult on themselves for some of the kind of silly things that happened towards the end. But, you see the graphic there with Caleb Love at his 29 points, 10 of 18. That's the kind of Caleb Love shooting that we're starting to see a little bit more of, Jason, that we didn't get a lot of last year from him. We certainly got a little bit more of it earlier in the season when he kind of settled in as Pac-12 Player of the Year last year. But it's been missing until about the last, I don't know, what would you say, 4 or 5 weeks? We started to see more and more of the Caleb Love that you'd like to see as a leader, both as the the fifth-year guy, but also a guy who just does it by taking it to the other team.
The Wildcats have upped their 3-point shooting percentage to 32.4%. Now, it was, I want to say 31, a little bit lower than that.
It was lower than that.
Shot, listen, I mean, that sounds like a lot. That's a lot. 2 3-pointers a game is 6 points, okay? That's a big deal. They've shot a lot better from 3. I think there's 2 things. I talked to Corey Williams today. He's the ESPN college basketball analyst who used to play for Arizona, and he said, well, they're passing better out of the double team and they're getting more open looks. I also think part of it was KJ Lewis, and the announcers really don't realize, because they've been making fun of his 3-point field goal percentage this year, 17, 18, 19%. But he had a wrist injury.
He did.
That was worse than the team was letting on. And listen, you could still play defense and do some things with a wrist injury, but shooting 3-pointers is probably not the easiest thing to do. I think that's kind of hurt their field goal percentage a little bit with him.
There's no question, and even KJ has started to hit more threes in this tournament, and
because he's healthier,
yeah. And he doesn't. Did you notice he didn't have the wrap on? I don't believe the other night. It didn't look like he had the wrap on. It also showed with him, if you noticed, when it was really, really rough for him, I'd say late January, early February, with his wrist, you watched him miss the front end of a free throw, the first of 2 free throws, but always swish the second one. It was almost as if he had to get that rhythm back with it, and maybe movement with his wrist again. So I agree, it was downplayed way more than it was. It was more serious than they let on. But I think he's played through it, and you can't keep him off the court anyway. As you mentioned, his defense is so spectacular that you'll give up a little bit offensively when he's not going well, but he's going pretty well right now, just like Caleb Love is.
West Virginia, Kansas, and Texas Tech are the 3 teams in which Arizona avenged an earlier loss to.
Right.
The situation here, though, is this Duke game was a long time ago. Mo Krivas was playing when they played Duke on November 22nd.
Exactly.
I believe it was a Friday night. So how much do you take from that game and what you could do better in avenging that loss? I mean, that's a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is you're not going to say, you're not, the rally cry in the locker room heading out to this game Thursday night. It's not going to be, we got to avenge our loss from back in December. That's not what they're out to do. What I like is the way that Tommy Lloyd and his staff get their teams ready for that second matchup. And you can say, okay, they lost to Houston in the Big 12 tournament title game, but they played a lot better, I thought, and they got worn down a little bit by Houston and their physicality, but not nearly like they did at the home game here, that Houston really just dominated that last 7 minutes. With this Duke game, it's a tale of two halves of a season, Jason. That first part of the season for Arizona, Mo Krivas, we didn't know how bad his ankle was, and he was playing and not playing all that great, but he was playing, and that didn't allow this team to develop. Once he went out and he was done for the year and he had the surgery and they knew what they had and the only guys that they were going to have, they reduced it down to an 8-man rotation. They really locked in on Henry Vesar and Tobe Awaka, and they just took off from there. So this team is so much different, and I would argue so much better than they were in December. You can make the argument Duke is better because everybody gets better, right, as the season goes on. But Duke didn't play the schedule Arizona did, not even close. And that's the one thing I hold my hat on too. I feel like Arizona's progression throughout the season has been because they came together as a team, knowing the elements, but also that rugged Big 12 schedule got them ready for right now. Duke played a much easier schedule, got better. They have the player of the year, Cooper Flagg. I'm not going to deny that. I like where Arizona is right now. I give them a pretty solid chance.
Jason Barr, Pat Parris here on the Huddle, KGO9's weekly streaming sports talk show, as we preview Arizona Duke and the Wildcats taking on the Blue Devils in the Sweet 16 in Newark. Pat, I know some people are looking back at that 2011 game in which Duke was the #1 seed. Arizona was a 5 seed in that game. This one was in Anaheim. This was the Derek Williams game, of course, where he had 32 points, 13 rebounds, including 3 thunderous dunks. It really kind of took the life out of Duke, who did have Kyrie Irving on that team.
That's right.
But what you could point to is, hey, #1 seeds get beaten in the Sweet 16 all the time. Arizona was one of them, 3 years ago.
Against Houston. Yeah.
When it lost to Houston. So it can happen. I don't know that Arizona has a player who could take over a game like
I don't know,
Derek
though.
Williams.
I don't know.
Can Caleb Love do that?
I mean, Caleb Love can put
come off the bench and do a little something. He has shown flashes of brilliance.
And maybe it doesn't have to be 2 or 1 guy, Jason. Maybe you just hit on it. Maybe it's a Caleb Love with 25, 27 points, and it's all of a sudden Carter Bryant goes off for 15 or 17, which we haven't really seen him do yet. It could be a couple of guys that do that. But the similarities don't just end with, 1 versus 4, and now then it was 1 versus 5. It was Duke goes in at an 8.5-point favorite in 2011. They go in as an 8.5-point favorite in 2025. I don't know. There's a lot of similarities for sure. The X factor still to me remains Caleb Love, and whether or not he can have a Derek Williams-esque kind of game, we'll have to see.
Yeah, Pat, I'm really impressed with Arizona's fans. I mean, I remember the 2014 Pac-12 football title game because it was Arizona against Oregon in San Jose, and it was like almost all Oregon fans.
Yep.
I didn't realize maybe Oregon doesn't travel as well for basketball, but the amount of fans that you could hear in that arena in Seattle, I was surprised. Now, listen, I'm still expecting a pro Duke crowd. It's 7 hours away. Is Durham from New Jersey, and you've got a lot of Duke alum in that part of New Jersey, especially. My brother-in-law, one of them. But I think you're going to see any Arizona fan with any type of radius around New Jersey in that arena on Thursday night.
Well, they travel, and maybe some of them are taking it to heart when Tommy Lloyd kind of challenges them to be loud and be present. And not only were they bigger in number than Oregon fans, they were just louder in a lot of ways. Not just because of numbers. I think they were just louder. Maybe they had more to cheer about. Especially after they got off that slow start, they really had a lot to cheer about. No, I've been impressed too. And I think you're right. There'll be more Duke fans there, but I think Arizona will be well represented. And don't forget, there are a lot of people that just buy tickets, to go see great basketball.
Right.
And they often root for the underdog in those.
And what about all the people who don't like Duke, who are just going to root against Duke?
Hey, I'm one of them. So I don't like Duke. I root against Duke no matter who they're playing. So yeah, that'll be part of it. I don't think that matters to this team, though. I think that they respond well when there is a crowd that's behind them, but the crowds aren't always behind them, and they seem to respond fairly well to it, to the opposition too. You can use that to your advantage, just like you can when you have a home crowd.
This will be Caleb Love's 10th game against Duke.
How about that?
I believe it's 7 with North Carolina. 1 last year's regular season in which Arizona won at Duke.
He played well there. Yeah, he played well there.
Shot before the first half ended.
Mm-hmm.
Then this year at McHale, and now here. Some people like to joke that he sent Coach King into retirement in the Final Four a few years ago. I'm not sure he's really the one responsible for that. John Shire's done a tremendous job though with that program. In his 3rd year here. So he's no stranger to playing Duke, only fitting that his career would come to this point. Hopefully it won't end at this point, his collegiate career, but only fitting with kind of the basketball gods kind of had this scenario in for them playing Duke. Some people even call this the Duke Invitational, that this was the easiest bracket of the 4, for Duke. They didn't have, some of the other tough teams that maybe we see in some of the other brackets. I'm not so sure that's the case, but they do get Arizona here as a 4 seed with, I believe Alabama is the 2 seed in the.
They are.
Region.
And,
so,
but looming out there, and it's not the odds aren't real good for this, but there is an Arizona BYU scenario of playing for the East Region Final. So
wouldn't that be something after that? As long as Tony Padilla's not reffing the game, right?
We'll have to look on that one. He had a couple of head scratchers last weekend too.
He had one bad one against St. John's. I believe. Yeah. So
yes, he did.
We'll get back to the Huddle poll question in just a minute. But first, Pat, we didn't talk about this before, but it did happen today. So yesterday was Jada Williams, and then today 2 of the Arizona's other top players in the women's team both hit the transfer portal. Brea Cunningham and Skylar Jones. Adia Barnes is saying this is just college basketball. It is now as it is now, but my gosh, the turnover on this women's program and what's happened is unfortunate. I would put the word in you.
Well,
and I feel for the fans at McHale because boy, they come out in big numbers for this program the last few years, and among the top 15 in attendance this year. And now the 3 kind of core players who are sophomores who you were expecting to see, develop for 4 years are probably not going to be back, and that's why I use the word unfortunate.
The turnover is happening, not only in the men's game, as we showed graphically with the Sweet 16 teams and how many have transferred. It's happening at just as an alarming rate in women's basketball, and I think that's part of my frustration with what's going on is the lack of commitment. And back in our day, and I'm going to sound like an old fuddy-dud, but back in our day, Jason, when you committed somewhere, you stayed there, right? You committed to a
Duke was the last team to have anybody not stay 4 years.
Yeah, and so you kind of wish the commitment would be there a little bit more. Now that's not happening in college basketball. I don't know why it's particularly hitting Adia Barnes as hard or harder than most the last few years. But there's definitely turnover. Now, she can go into the transfer portal and put together potentially even a better team than she had. We don't know. We have to wait and see. But it's not it's not going according to plan that we would have liked to have seen. Okay, you
Hey,
barely missed
Brea
the end.
Cunningham didn't develop. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
she didn't.
I'm sorry. I know her field goal percentage numbers are big, but she only played 22 minutes a game. She just got always in foul trouble.
Always in foul trouble, right? Yeah, that
Yeah.
was a big part of it. So maybe that's one that Diaz will say, I'll take that scholarship and I'll go find in the transfer portal. I'll find someone, and but they're good things can come out of it, but they're certainly makes you a little nervous about where the program heads with Adia with only 1 year left on her contract entering next season.
Did you get a chance to see any of the Sean Miller introductory news conference today at Texas?
I was just going to bring that up. First of all, before you tell us about that, what a day for Arizona basketball, though, when you've got Josh Pastner going to UNLV, you've got Mike Bibby going to Sacramento State, and then, of course, Sean Miller goes to Texas.
Well, he didn't play here.
No, but they all have Arizona ties,
right.
Arizona basketball ties. So three coaches named yesterday and today, and they all have Arizona basketball ties.
If you haven't seen it, I thought the most interesting soundbite was that he actually mentioned Bijan Robinson and Laura Ianello in that he was kind of following. He did say, I used to see Bijan in Little Old Tucson or Little Tucson. So he did say Little Tucson. I don't know. If people in Tucson are going to like that. But
you don't need to put that. I mean, why? Like Cincinnati's such a hopping, such a megatropolis, and Austin's such a gigantic.
Well, he called Xavier a small Jesuit school in Cincinnati.
Well, that's what it is, though. It is. But the city,
you watch the news conference, and you really, you don't have to wonder why he went to Texas. It's a bigger time situation. I get it.
Question.
It feels a little gross. There's a school that took a chance on him twice, especially the second time when there was a cloud over him. But you can look at it and say, hey, they didn't do it out of charity. They did it because they really thought he was the best basketball coach in the program.
And oh, by the way, they made the tournament, right? So it's not as if he didn't do anything to reciprocate their generosity to say, look, we're going to bail you out of being, unceremoniously leaving Tucson. We're gonna just give you a job. They expected him to win. He did, and when you win, you get opportunities. When you're at Xavier, you get an opportunity to go to a Texas.
So one thing I'll say is it looks like Xavier's interested in Chris Mack now coming back to Xavier. It'd be his second time there. He's at the College of Charleston. Listen, I don't know what Greg Marshall's situation is right now. If he ever wants to coach college basketball again, if they feel he's got too much damage, but I don't know if he was in the running a year ago for the College of Charleston job. But here's a guy who's from South Carolina, was an assistant at College of Charleston in the 90s when they were making their runs. I would love to see him back in the sport. I don't, I haven't talked to him. I don't know his situation, but I used to cover Winthrop in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So I kind of have my eye on that. Anyway, Pat, before we go, let's go back to the Huddle poll question here. What do you think is the biggest key? Obviously, there's more than these three, and you could pick a few of them, but you only have to pick one. Look, people are looking at the star players, Cooper Flagg and Caleb Love. So I picked B. I think it's kind of also there's a little recency bias there. Flagg had a big game against Arizona. Caleb Love was doing great there. So I think there's a little bit of that too. And maybe people didn't know what we meant by the 3-point shooting defense or offense, but it looks like A and B are dominating there.
Yeah, and I think the key, real quick, for Cooper Flagg and containing Cooper Flagg a little bit is both Tobe Awaka and Henry Vasar have to do it without getting into foul trouble. They got into foul trouble against Oregon, Jason, and really what it did was it sent Tobe Awaka to the bench. Vasar comes in, picks up his third foul, and then he has to just kind of stand there. Yeah. And then Awaka came back in, got his fourth foul, and he just kind of had to stand there. You can't just stand there against Cooper Flagg. You've got to create an impenetrable force, a wall, if you will, to block him from making points in the paint.
If we have that situation where there's a stoppage of play late in the first half and maybe like 30 seconds to go or under, and Duke's on offense, you got to put E-Man in there to take a foul. Remember when he was in the game for 8 seconds?
I do.
Arizona's third string big. You got to put him in there to make sure that they don't get a late foul on.
E-Man got in the end of the Akron game and did pretty well.
That's right. That's right. He's a little of a project. So
we've seen projects at Arizona, the big men develop into quite good players. So you never know with E-Man.
Actually, one quick last point. Do all the replays bother you late in the Okay. Yeah. Here's why. I'll tell you what. They've changed it in the NFL, so if it's super obvious, they don't have to take 10 minutes.
Right.
They just need to make that change in college basketball.
There needs
if you've
to
got
be,
an obvious one, there needs to be they need to make that switch like they do in the NFL.
well, and all that is Jason, when you're talking about a 64 team tournament, you've got the
68.
ability to have a centralized replay place that can immediately look at that and just say, nope, you're wrong. It's this way. And then just go on and just move on.
Yeah.
The watching it, and then one referee leaves and the other one comes over, then they all three get together and they all three have to agree, or at least the majority have to agree. It just takes too long.
Too much. Okay. Yep. All right. Everybody enjoy the Sweet 16. Hopefully Arizona can live to see another day, a little bit longer. If not, listen, if they get beat in a close game by a fantastic Duke team, what are you going to do?
You
but
tip your
don't
cap.
beat themselves. Don't beat themselves. And we'll be here to talk about it one way or another. And who knows, maybe in there's something crazy happens and we'll be talking San Antonio.
Maybe we'll be on our way to San Antonio. You never know.
Listen, 3 years ago this week, we were.
That's true. We were already there.
I was so cold and trying to do that huddle outside.
Oh, that's right. We did it from the side of the road.
That's right. Okay. So this is at least season 4 for the year 4 for the Huddle. For
Yep.
Pat Parris, I'm Jason Barr. It's been the Huddle, KGUN 9's weekly streaming sports talk show. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you right back here next week.